Now to the newly released video. Sources say show the moment that the U.S. Coast Guard seized a boat while searching for that missing American wife. The husband says she was swept away. Here's Victor Akendo.
Tonight, new body camera video shows the moment sources say the U.S. Coast Guard seizes the Soulmate, the sailboat owned by Brian and Lynette Hooker, the woman who went missing in the Bahamas.
Captain, how many people on board? How many people on board?
The Coast Guard boarding the sailboat on May 9th, 1 month after Brian says Lynette fell from their dinghy and was swept away by the ocean. The two men, who are not identified, tell the Coast Guard they are taking that boat, the Soulmate, to Fernandina Beach in North Florida.
For the owner.
Yeah, is he going to meet you there?
I don't think so, no.
So right now the boat's being seized?
While the hookers are not named in the video, sources told ABC News the boat does belong to them. Last month, Coast Guard divers searched for Lynette in a new area off Elbow Key, near where the boat was previously anchored.
You are about to watch the exact moment federal agents boarded a sailboat called Soulmate. Two men stand on the deck. A Coast Guard officer asks a simple question: how many people on board? Nobody answers right away. That hesitation is the whole story, because this boat belonged to a couple who documented their entire life at sea. Sunsets, open water, a marriage that looked, from the outside, like something out of a dream. And 2 months before this footage was recorded, one of them vanished into the ocean and never came back. Her name was Lynette Hooker. She was 55 years old. She was an experienced boater, a strong swimmer, and by every account, someone who knew these waters better than most people who sail them for a living. Her husband, Brian Hooker, says she fell overboard during a routine dinghy ride back to their boat. He says the seas turned rough. He says he tried everything to save her. He says a lot of things. Here is what you need to know before we go any further. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how investigators traced a single piece of digital data back to Brian's own phone, and how that data placed the dinghy somewhere completely different from the location he gave police. You will also see how a small pink object recovered from a boat Lynette was never supposed to set foot on again may be the single most damning piece of evidence in this entire case. Keep those two details in your mind: a location that doesn't match, and an object that shouldn't exist. We are going to come back to both of them, and when we do, you will understand why investigators stopped calling this an accident. Let's start at the beginning, because nothing about this case makes sense without it. Brian and Lynette Hooker were married for 25 years. They ran a social media page under the name Sailing Hookers, showing off a life most people only dream about. Ocean views, open skies, a boat they named Soulmate, like it meant something. But neighbors back in Onstead, Michigan, told a very different version of that marriage. They described years of conflict. In 2024, Lynette told a close friend she was done. She was leaving. She meant it. A month later, she changed her mind. By April 2026, the couple was anchored near Elbow Cay in the Bahamas, living the life they had built their entire identity around. And on the night of April 4th, that life ended for one of them. Brian says they had gone ashore in Hopetown and were heading back to Soulmate by dinghy, an 8-foot motorboat, when the weather turned. He says Lynette went overboard and took the engine keys down with her. Without the keys, he says, he had no way to start the motor and go after her. He says he paddled. He says he fought the current for 8 hours before finally reaching land alone. He did not report her missing that night. He waited until the next morning, April 5th, to call it in. Think about that for a second. Your wife of 25 years disappears into the ocean in front of you, and you wait. You do not radio for help in the moment. You wait until the sun comes up. If a story like this is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night trying to figure out what actually happened, hit subscribe right now, because this case is about to take a turn that even seasoned investigators did not see coming. Local boat captains who knew those exact waters near Elbow Cay came forward almost immediately. They said the conditions that night were calm, not rough, not dangerous, nothing close to what Brian described to police. So if the water wasn't rough that night, what really happened out there? Before investigators could answer that question, they needed something Brian couldn't control. They needed data. 4 days after Lynette was reported missing, the Royal Bahamas Police Force made their move. On April 8th, they arrested Brian Hooker. The grounds were probable cause, and he was taken to the Central Police Station in Freeport for questioning. That questioning lasted 5 full days. 5 days is a long time to hold someone you don't plan to charge. On April 13th, Brian walked out of that police station a free man. No charges were filed. But Bahamian Police Commissioner Shanta Nolas made something very clear to reporters that day. Brian Hooker was not cleared. He remained a suspect in an active investigation, and that distinction matters more than most people realize. Speaking to NBC News after his release, Brian repeated a phrase you will hear again and again throughout this case. He said he would never harm Lynette. He said finding her was his only focus. He told people he planned to stay in the Bahamas to help search for his wife. Then he left. His attorney said he had returned to the United States to be with his ailing mother. After that, his exact whereabouts became difficult to track. While Brian went quiet, the people around this case did not. A former friend named Daniel Danford came forward with a detail that had not yet gone public. He told investigators that Soulmate was equipped with a high-tech infrared thermal camera mounted on the boat, capable of detecting and recording movement. That single tip is what triggered the warrant investigators needed to seize the boat. They needed the camera's serial number to access whatever footage it might have captured that night. Around the same time, investigators seized both vessels connected to this case. Soulmate was initially held at the Coast Guard station in Fort Pierce, Florida, before being transferred to Fort Lauderdale for a full forensic examination. The dinghy, that same 8-foot motorboat at the center of Brian's entire story, was taken from Bahamian custody and shipped to the United States separately. 2 boats. 2 sets of forensic teams. One story that was about to fall apart. Because here is what those investigators found when they pulled the electronic data off devices belonging to Brian Hooker. GPS records showed the dinghy moving out across the Sea of Abaco that night, stopping at a specific location, and then returning. That location did not match the spot Brian gave to police as the place where Lynette went overboard. Read that again. The location where he told investigators to search was not the location his own GPS data showed the boat actually going. A former homicide prosecutor consulted on this case put it in blunt terms. When the last known person with a missing individual tells an inconsistent story, that is not just suspicious, that is particularly damning. Think about what that means for the search efforts. For weeks, rescue teams combed an area of ocean based entirely on Brian's account of where Lynette went into the water. If that account was wrong, whether by mistake or by design, every single hour spent searching that original zone was time nobody could get back. This is where we deliver on what we told you back in the beginning. Remember the mismatched location we asked you to hold on to? This is it. The GPS on Brian's own devices contradicted the very story he gave the people trying to find his wife. But the GPS data was not the only thing waiting inside that boat. Investigators recovered something else from Soulmate during their forensic sweep. Something small, something personal. Something that, once you understand what it means, completely changes how you see this entire case. We are getting to that next. But first, you need to understand exactly what Brian's story required to be true, and why almost nobody close to this case believed it anymore. The GPS data proved he lied about where. The next discovery would prove something far worse. Here is the second detail we asked you to remember. A small pink object recovered from a boat that its owner was never supposed to return to. Let's talk about exactly what investigators found and why it stopped this case in its tracks. Investigators recovered a light pink Apple Watch from Soulmate. On its own, that might not mean much. Lots of people own Apple Watches. But look at the last known photograph of Lynette Hooker, taken at the Abaco Inn, the final place she was confirmed to be alive. In that photo, she is wearing an Apple Watch with a light pink band on her left wrist. Same watch, same band, same wrist. By Brian's own account, Lynette never made it back to Soulmate that night. She went overboard from the dinghy on the way back. She never set foot on that boat again. So how, exactly, did her watch end up recovered from the very vessel Brian says she never reached? That question alone is enough to keep any investigator up at night. But it gets more complicated. Let's break down everything working against Brian Hooker's version of events, point by point, because when you line these up together, the picture becomes very hard to ignore. Number 1. The location. GPS data from his own devices places the dinghy somewhere entirely different from where he told police Lynette went overboard. Number 2. The timeline. He waited approximately 8 hours to reach shore, and then waited until the next morning to report her missing at all. Number 3. The weather. Multiple local captains who know those exact waters describe conditions that night as calm, directly contradicting his account of rough seas. Number 4. His demeanor. Lynette's daughter, Carly Alasworth, told the Today Show that when Brian called her with the news, he sounded monotone, relaxed, not panicked, not broken. Number 5. The watch. A personal item belonging to Lynette, recovered from a boat she supposedly never returned to that night. 5 separate pieces of evidence. 5 separate contradictions. And we haven't even gotten to the thermal camera yet. That camera, the one Daniel Danford tipped investigators about, was mounted on Soulmate and designed to detect and record movement right up until the moment the boat lost power. All of that footage, along with every other piece of digital evidence recovered from both vessels, was sent to FBI analysts at Quantico for review. After 2 months in open water, what condition would a body be in? That question was raised by forensic expert Joseph Scott Morgan during national coverage of this case. Could blunt force trauma still be determined? Could cause of death still be established? These are not casual questions. These are the exact questions a prosecutor needs answered before this case can move forward in any courtroom. And they are questions that get harder to answer with every week that passes without a body. Lynette's daughter kept her public statement simple, and somehow that simplicity hits harder than anything else in this case. She has to be somewhere. 4 words. A grieving daughter refusing to accept that her mother simply disappeared without a trace. So now you have the timeline, you have the contradictions, you have a watch that should not exist where it was found, and a camera that may have captured the truth. The only thing missing is Brian Hooker himself, and where he has been hiding since walking out of that Freeport police station. If you were sitting on the jury for this case, does the watch alone convince you something is seriously wrong here? Drop your answer in the comments, because we are reading every single one. We are about to find out exactly what happened after Brian Hooker disappeared from public view, and why federal officials made a decision that changed everything about how this case is being treated. Investigators had the evidence. Now they needed to figure out where the suspect had gone. After Brian Hooker left the Bahamas, his exact whereabouts became genuinely difficult to track. His attorney maintained he had gone to be with his ailing mother in the United States, but while Brian stayed quiet, the people who knew him did not. Friend Marn Stevenson, who spoke with Brian directly after Lynette disappeared, told News Nation she was still holding on to hope that there was an explanation. But she also acknowledged the situation raised serious, unavoidable questions. Troy Pritchard, a member of the initial search team deployed to find Lynette, was far less diplomatic. He told CBS News that Brian's story simply did not add up to him from the very beginning. The United States Coast Guard agreed. They opened their own separate criminal investigation into exactly what happened on that water the night Lynette disappeared. And then, on May 9th, 1 month after Brian said his wife was swept away by the ocean, body camera footage captured something the public was not meant to see so clearly. The United States Coast Guard boarded Soulmate directly. In the footage, an officer asks a simple, direct question. "Captain, how many people on board?" 2 unidentified men respond. They tell the officer they are taking the boat, Soulmate, to Fernandina Beach in North Florida. When asked if the owner would meet them there, one of the men gives a short, almost dismissive answer. No, he doesn't think so. Then comes the moment that makes this footage so unsettling to watch. "So, right now, the boat's being seized?" the officer asks. "Yeah," comes the reply. That's it. No confrontation, no drama. Just a quiet, procedural confirmation that federal agents were now in possession of the vessel at the center of a suspected murder investigation, while the man who owned it was somewhere else entirely, unreachable, unaccounted for. If footage like this genuinely unsettles you the way it unsettles us, subscribe right now, because this case has continued developing, and we are committed to covering every single update as it happens. Sources told ABC News the boat did in fact belong to Brian and Lynette Hooker, even though neither of them appears named in the footage itself. Soulmate remained in Florida under federal control, undergoing the forensic examination that would eventually recover that pink Apple Watch and whatever data existed on the onboard thermal camera system. Think about the timeline here for a moment. 1 month after Lynette disappeared, her husband's boat was already being physically seized by federal agents. That is not standard procedure for a simple accident at sea. That is the behavior of an active criminal investigation building a case. Brian's Bahamian attorney, Terrell Butler, continued to release statements insisting his client categorically and unequivocally denied any wrongdoing and remained fully cooperative with authorities. But cooperation looks different when the person in question cannot be located for comment and when the boat he lived on gets hauled away for federal forensic testing while he stays silent. Innocent people repeat, "I would never hurt her." Guilty people have said that exact same sentence too. Which one do you think Brian Hooker is? Tell us in the comments below, because this community has some of the sharpest instincts we've seen on any case we cover. By early June, United States officials made something official that had only been implied up to this point. The disappearance of Lynette Hooker was now being formally investigated as a possible foreign murder of a United States national. Not a missing persons case, not an accident, a suspected murder. That classification changes everything about what comes next, including a search effort unlike anything conducted in this case so far. The boat had been seized, the classification had been made, but 2 months after Lynette vanished, one thing was still missing, and it was the one thing that could end this case for good. On June 2, 2026, a specialized United States Coast Guard dive team arrived in Marsh Harbor in the Bahamas. This was not a repeat of the original search effort. The Bahamian government granted special permission for investigators to access areas that had never been searched before, areas identified specifically through the GPS data pulled from Brian Hooker's own devices. The resources deployed for this search were substantial. Specialized divers went into the water directly. Remotely operated underwater vehicles were sent down into areas too deep or too dangerous for human divers to reach. Cadaver dogs worked the surrounding land. The search extended all the way to the Abaco Inn, the last confirmed location where Lynette Hooker was seen alive. They were not working alone. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and a K-9 unit from the Broward County Sheriff's Office in Florida all joined the operation. On June 5th, the search concluded. On June 8th, the Coast Guard made it official. No body had been recovered. As of this recording, no charges have been filed against Brian Hooker. Here is everything investigators currently have in their possession. GPS data from Brian's own electronic devices that places the dinghy somewhere entirely different from where he told police it was. Forensic evidence pulled from 2 seized vessels, both examined thoroughly on United States soil. A light pink Apple Watch, recovered from a boat its owner should never have returned to, and footage potentially captured by a thermal camera that was actively running the night Lynette disappeared. A former homicide prosecutor who has followed this case closely stated something that should stay with you long after this video ends. A murder case can move forward without a body. Inconsistency, physical evidence, and digital forensics have convicted people before. Brian Hooker has not been charged, but he has also never been cleared. His attorney continues to insist he is fully cooperating with authorities wherever he currently is. The Coast Guard's investigative service tip line remains active, and the public is still being asked to come forward with anything connected to this case, no matter how small it might seem. Carly Allisworth has not stopped pushing for answers. She is doing that for her mother, and for a family that has been waiting since April 4th for something, anything, that resembles closure. Lynette Hooker was an experienced sailor, a strong swimmer, a mother, a woman who built her entire identity around the ocean, and who vanished into it under circumstances that get harder to explain with every new piece of evidence investigators uncover. If this case has stayed with you the way it has stayed with us, subscribe right now. Because when Lynette Hooker's case breaks again, and we believe it will, you will be the very first to know. The investigation remains open. Somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened on that water on the night of April 4th. Do you think Brian Hooker will ever be formally charged in his wife's disappearance? Comment yes or no below and tell us exactly why. We read every single response, and this community has never let us down. We will be here the moment this case changes again.